Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the shadowed corners of a sparse barracks, an unassuming trunk lay hidden, its presence both comforting and threatening to Louis Henderson's existence. It was a strange dichotomy for a 26-year-old man to manage, especially one molded by the rugged demands of Fort Benning. Inside the trunk, an unexpected secret stirred, far removed from the expected arsenal of a military base. Not weapons, not drugs, but fabric. Soft, exquisite fabric of vivid hues, holding a profound truth about Louis. On this particular day, the barracks stood empty, allowing Louis a fleeting chance at freedom. He approached the trunk, fingers trailing over its aged exterior, ruminating on the 3 years of deception. 3 years of splitting himself between the disciplined soldier, complete with the crisp uniformity expected and unyielding discipline, and the hidden figure he embraced in stolen, private moments. Only Louis had volunteered to stay behind, claiming paperwork and a desire for some peace and quiet.
"Just me and you this weekend,"
he whispered to the trunk, fishing the tiny key from the chain around his neck. The metal was warm from pressing against his skin beneath his standard-issue olive t-shirt. The lock clicked open, and Louis lifted the lid carefully, as if releasing something delicate that might escape. Nestled inside lay carefully folded garments, a silk blouse in pale cream, several skirts of varying lengths, undergarments that bore no resemblance to military-issue boxer briefs, and his newest acquisition, a red satin dress that had cost nearly a full month's pay, ordered discreetly online and shipped to a private mailbox off base. Beside these treasures sat a blonde wig, professional-grade makeup kit, and a pair of black stiletto heels he'd learned to walk in through painful practice during previous moments of solitude. Louis glanced at his watch. 5 hours before anyone was due back. More than enough time. He showered quickly in the empty communal bathroom, shaving carefully every inch that would be exposed. Back in the barracks, he rolled on sheer stockings, fastened a padded bra, and stepped into the red satin dress that clung to the curves he'd created. The zipper whispered up his back with practiced ease. The blonde wig came next, adjusting it with skilled fingers until it lay naturally. Louis caught himself smiling at the transformation already taking place in the small mirror propped on his footlocker. The makeup required concentration, foundation to mask the day's shadow, contouring to soften his jaw, eyeliner applied with a surgeon's precision. 40 minutes of careful work culminated in a slash of crimson lipstick that matched the dress perfectly. Finally, the heels. 4 inches of gleaming black leather that transformed his posture, his walk, his entire presence. The woman who stared back from the mirror looked nothing like Private First Class Henderson. She was elegant, confident, beautiful even. Louis felt his breath catch as he admired his handiwork.
"Hello, Allison,"
he whispered to his reflection, using the name that had lived in his head for years, but rarely passed his lips. For 2 peaceful hours, Allison existed in the world. She read a novel on Louis's bunk, practiced her walk up and down the empty barracks aisle, even dared to take a series of selfies with his phone, photos he knew he would delete before midnight, however much it pained him. The crash of the barracks door slamming open hit him like a physical blow. "Telling you, Rivera couldn't hold his liquor if it came in a sippy cup!" A familiar voice echoed down the hallway, followed by raucous laughter. Martinez. And that laugh belonged to Dawson, and the third voice jumping in, Peterson. Louis's 3 closest friends in the company, his roommates, who were supposed to be in Atlanta until tomorrow night. Time stretched and compressed simultaneously. The barracks door was 30 yards from his bunk. The trunk was open, his male clothes tossed aside. There was nowhere to hide, no explanation possible, and no time to change. The footsteps grew louder. Louis, Allison, stood frozen in place, heels rooted to the floor, the red dress suddenly feeling like a target, the blonde wig heavy on his head. I still can't believe they closed the whole... Martinez rounded the corner first, words dying as his eyes registered the scene. He stopped so abruptly that Dawson crashed into his back. "What the hell, man?" Dawson complained, shoving Martinez forward to create space, then froze himself as he spotted the cause of the pileup. Peterson, the tallest of the three, peered over their shoulders. "Holy shit," he breathed. For an eternal moment, 4 soldiers stared at each other in absolute silence. Louis in his red satin dress and blonde wig, his 3 battle buddies in civilian clothes, weekend bags slung over their shoulders, expressions cycling rapidly through confusion, shock, and something Louis couldn't quite identify. Louis started, but his voice sounded wrong, too high, too practiced as Allison. He cleared his throat, but before he could continue, Martinez stepped forward. "Damn, Henderson," he said, dropping his duffel bag. "You've got better legs than my sister, and she was a track star." The unexpected response knocked the air from Louis's lungs. Dawson's eyes were wide, but his voice was steady. "Is that why you always volunteer to stay behind on leave weekends?" Louis managed a jerky nod, still waiting for the disgust, the anger, the inevitable report to their commanding officer. Peterson pushed past the others, his expression unreadable. He was the squad leader, the one whose opinion mattered most. He stopped a few feet from Louis, took in the full transformation, then spoke in the same measured tone he used during mission briefings. "My cousin transitioned 3 years ago," he said simply. "Army nearly lost a damn good mechanic because of it. She's Navy now." The words hung in the air, an offering of something Louis had never expected. Understanding. "I'm not..." Louis began, then stopped, uncertain what label applied, what truth to speak aloud. "I don't know what I am," he finished honestly. "Well, right now you're a soldier in a cocktail dress," Dawson said, dropping his bag and heading for his bunk. "And I'm a soldier who needs a nap because our bus broke down and we had to hitch back. So, unless this is going to be a fashion show with commentary, I'm crashing for an hour." The normality of the response, the absence of judgment, made Louis's knees weak. "The club got shut down for code violations," Martinez explained, as if they were continuing an ordinary conversation. "Figured we'd head back early, sleep in our own bunks instead of that fleabag motel." He studied Louis with frank curiosity.
You look good, by the way. Like, actually good. Not just dude in a dress good.
Peterson nodded his agreement, then gestured to Louis's open trunk.
"You might want to lock that up before the rest of the company gets back tomorrow. Not everyone's going to be as chill as us."
With that, the 3 moved to their respective bunks, unpacking bags, checking phones, falling into their normal routines as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Louis remained rooted in place, the adrenaline that had flooded his system leaving him lightheaded.
"You're okay with this?"
he finally managed. Peterson looked up from his phone.
"Henderson, I've trusted you to have my back in firefights. You think I give a damn what you wear on your own time?"
He shrugged.
"Besides, my cousin's a lot happier now. Maybe you would be too."
"I don't know if I'm transgender." Louis said, testing the word aloud for the first time. I just know that sometimes I need to be her. Allison! Allison, Martinez repeated, testing the name. Suits you better than Louis. Not gonna lie. Dawson, already horizontal on his bunk, raised a hand without opening his eyes. If anyone outside this room gives you shit, they answer to us. Now, can we please talk about this after I've slept? Something tight and painful that had lived in Louis's chest for years began to unwind. He carefully sat on his own bunk, the red satin dress whispering around his thighs, and realized he was crying, silent tears tracking through his carefully applied makeup. Peterson noticed first. Without a word, he tossed Louis a clean bandana from his footlocker. Their eyes met, and Peterson gave a small nod, the same nod he gave before missions. We've got this. Together. Thank you, Louis whispered, dabbing at the tears with the bandana, careful not to smear his mascara. Martinez grinned. Don't thank us yet. If word gets out, we're totally borrowing that dress for the next battalion party. And just like that, with unexpected acceptance from the men he'd feared would reject him, Louis felt Allison take a step closer to the surface. No longer a secret to be locked away, but a possibility, a future, a truth. 6 months later, the transition was well underway. Not just the medical process that had begun with counseling sessions and hormone therapy, but the social metamorphosis that had surprised everyone with its smoothness. Allison adjusted the collar of her uniform, now tailored to her changing body, and checked her reflection in the small mirror of her new private quarters. Her auburn hair was growing out nicely, the blonde wig long discarded as her natural color emerged in a stylish pixie cut that complemented her features. A knock at her door preceded Martinez's voice.
Transport leaves in 15, Ollie. You ready for this?
She opened the door to find all 3 of her friends waiting, dressed in their Class A uniforms. Today marked her first official function as Allison Henderson, following the Army's formal recognition of her transition process. As ready as I'll ever be, she replied, smoothing her uniform one last time. The paperwork had been staggering, the meetings endless, but Peterson's quiet advocacy and her commander's surprising support had cleared obstacles she'd expected to be insurmountable.
You look sharp,
Dawson said, giving her a thumbs up.
Better creases in those pants than mine. That's because she actually uses an iron,
Martinez teased.
Unlike some savages I could mention.
Peterson checked his watch.
We should move. Colonel doesn't appreciate tardiness, especially at recognition ceremonies.
The 4 of them walked across the base, drawing curious glances but no open hostility. Word had spread quickly after Allison had begun her official transition, and while not everyone understood, the culture of discipline prevailed. She was still a soldier, still performed her duties with excellence, and that counted for more than many civilians might expect.
Nervous?
Peterson asked quietly as they approached the administration building. Terrified, Allison admitted. First time in front of the whole battalion as, well, me. Martinez snorted. After that firefight in Kandahar, a ceremony should be a cakewalk. Different kind of courage, Dawson said, displaying the emotional intelligence that often surprised people who underestimated him. But same badass inside. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. The colonel's speech about diversity strengthening the fighting force, the presentation of Allison's updated service records and ID, the polite applause from assembled officers. Through it all, Her 3 friends stood at parade rest nearby, their presence a silent bulwark against judgment. Afterward, at the small reception, Allison found herself surrounded by well-wishers she hadn't expected. Officers who had served with her father, enlisted personnel who respected her work ethic, even the gruff first sergeant who had initially seemed most resistant to the change.
Henderson,
the first sergeant said, approaching with 2 cups of punch. He offered one to Allison.
Your father would have been proud today.
The mention of her father, a career army man who had died before Allison had fully understood her own identity, caught her off guard. Sir? The older man's weathered face softened slightly.
I served with Captain Henderson in Desert Storm. He always said a soldier's character was what mattered, not what they looked like.
He raised his cup slightly.
Takes courage to live your truth. That's the Henderson I remember.
Allison blinked rapidly against sudden tears. Thank you, First Sergeant. As the reception wound down, she found herself in a quiet corner with her 3 friends, the men who had discovered her secret that day in the barracks and changed her life with their acceptance.
So,
Martinez said, loosening his tie now that the formal part of the day was done. Celebratory dinner off base? My treat. You paid last time, Dawson objected. It's my turn. Actually, Peterson interrupted, I made reservations at Anthony's. Figured this warranted something nicer than the usual burger joint. Allison smiled at them, these brothers-in-arms who had become family in ways she'd never anticipated. I'd like that, but first, she hesitated. There's something I need to do. The 3 exchanged glances, then Peterson nodded.
We'll wait for you at the East Gate. Take your time.
20 minutes later, Allison stood alone before a white marker in the small military cemetery at the edge of the base. Her father's grave was well maintained, with fresh flowers suggesting her mother had visited recently. Hi, Dad, she said softly, feeling only slightly self-conscious, talking to the marble stone. It's me, though I suppose you wouldn't recognize me now. She smoothed her uniform jacket, the same olive green her father had worn for 20 years. I'm still a Henderson, still a soldier, just finally the right version of myself. The late afternoon sunlight warmed the stone, catching the engraved letters of her father's name and rank.
I hope the first sergeant was right. I hope you would have understood.
She swallowed hard. I'm happy, Dad. For maybe the first time since you left, I'm finally happy. A gentle breeze stirred the cemetery's oak trees, sending a shower of golden leaves spiraling around her. Allison stood a moment longer, then straightened her shoulders and turned toward the East Gate, where her friends waited to celebrate this milestone in her continuing journey. As she walked away, her steps were lighter than they had been in years. The weight of secrecy finally lifted, replaced by the sweet burden of authenticity, a load she was now strong enough to carry. 1 year after that fateful day in the barracks, Allison's transition had progressed far beyond what she had initially imagined possible. Her auburn hair now fell past her shoulders in soft waves. Hormones had softened her features and redistributed her body's contours, and the woman who looked back from her mirror each morning was finally the person she had always glimpsed beneath the surface.
Stop fidgeting with your dress,
Martinez chided, swatting her hand away from the emerald green satin that hugged her figure. You'll wrinkle it, and then what was the point of spending 2 hours ironing? I'm nervous, Allison admitted, smoothing the fabric one last time. It's my first time seeing my mother since... well, since I became me. The four friends were preparing for a weekend pass to Allison's hometown, where she would finally reunite with her widowed mother. They had maintained phone contact throughout the transition, but Margaret Henderson had been recovering from hip surgery, making travel impossible. Now, a year later, Allison was finally ready to present herself in person.
Your mom already accepted you over the phone,
Dawson reminded her, packing his own weekend bag.
She asked to meet your support system, which is why we're all tagging along. That's a good sign.
Peterson nodded his agreement.
From what you've told us, she sounds like a reasonable woman, and she's had time to adjust to the idea. Besides,
Martinez added with his characteristic grin,
who could reject a face this pretty? Those Henderson cheekbones finally getting the showcase they deserve.
Allison threw a pillow at him, but the banter had its intended effect, calming her nerves. These three men had seen her through every step of her journey, from that terrifying moment of discovery to medical appointments, paperwork battles, and the occasional confrontation with less accepting individuals. They had become more than friends. They were the family she had chosen, who had in turn chosen to stand by her through a transformation none of them had anticipated that weekend a year ago. The 5-hour drive to her childhood home passed quickly, filled with road trip snacks, terrible singing along to the radio, and the easy conversation of people who had seen each other at their best and worst. As they pulled into the familiar driveway of the modest ranch house where she had grown up, Allison felt her heart rate accelerate. "What if she doesn't recognize me?" she whispered.
"Then we'll introduce you,"
Peterson said simply.
"One step at a time, like always."
They hadn't even reached the front door when it swung open, revealing Margaret Henderson, a slender woman in her 60s, with the same auburn hair as her daughter, though hers was now streaked with silver. For a moment, mother and daughter stood frozen, taking each other in across the years and changes that separated them. Then Margaret stepped forward, arms outstretched.
"Allison,"
she said, voice thick with emotion. "My beautiful girl." The embrace that followed broke something open inside Allison. A final barrier she hadn't realized still stood. She clung to her mother, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender perfume and home, feeling accepted in a way she had scarcely dared to hope for. "Mom," she managed through tears. "These are my friends. They're the ones who saw the real you when you needed it most," Margaret finished, releasing her daughter to extend a hand to the three men standing awkwardly by the car. "I've heard so much about all of you. Please come inside. I've prepared dinner, and there's someone else who's been waiting to meet Allison." Curious, Allison followed her mother into the house, the three soldiers trailing behind. In the living room, rising from an armchair with the help of a cane, stood her father's older brother, Uncle Robert, the family patriarch, who had always seemed the most traditional, the most set in his ways. Allison froze, unprepared for this encounter. Uncle Robert had been a career military man, like her father, from a generation that rarely discussed feelings, let alone gender identity. "Uncle Rob," she managed, suddenly conscious of her green dress, her visible curves, the makeup she had applied so carefully that morning. The older man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once, decisive.
"You have your grandmother's profile,"
he said gruffly.
"Never noticed it before. Suits you."
With those simple words, the last of Allison's fear dissolved. She crossed the room to embrace her uncle, who patted her back awkwardly, but with genuine affection. The dinner that followed was surreal in its normalcy. Her mother served pot roast, Allison's childhood favorite, while Uncle Robert interrogated her friends about their military service with the interest of one career soldier to another. There were moments of awkwardness, questions carefully phrased, old habits of address quickly corrected, but beneath it all ran a current of unmistakable acceptance. Later, as her friends helped clear the table, Allison found herself alone with her mother in the kitchen. "I was so afraid," she admitted quietly, rinsing dishes before loading the dishwasher. "Afraid you'd see me and something would change, that seeing would be different from knowing." Margaret smiled, the corners of her eyes crinkling in the way Allison remembered from childhood confidences. "When you were about 5, you found my makeup drawer. I came in to find you with lipstick all over your face, wearing my pearls." She handed Allison another plate. "You looked up at me with such joy, such rightness. Then you saw my expression and got very quiet, put everything away so carefully." Allison stilled, a forgotten memory surfacing. "You weren't angry." "No," Margaret agreed. "Just startled. And later, worried for you. The world can be cruel to those who don't fit its expectations." She touched her daughter's cheek gently. "But looking at you now, seeing you finally comfortable in your own skin with friends who clearly adore you, I wish your father could see the amazing woman his child has become." From the dining room came a burst of laughter as Martinez apparently finished telling one of his outrageous stories, followed by Uncle Robert's deeper chuckle of appreciation. "I think," Allison said, looking toward the sound of that unexpected harmony, "he might have surprised us, like everyone else has." Later that night, after her mother and uncle had retired and her friends had claimed the guest room and pull-out couch, Allison found herself alone in her childhood bedroom. Her mother had redecorated slightly, replacing the sports posters with more neutral artwork, but otherwise left it untouched. She opened the closet, curious what might remain of her past life, and found a surprise. Hanging alongside a few old clothes was a garment bag she didn't recognize. A note pinned to it read simply, "I thought you might want this. Love, Mom." Inside was a vintage dress in deep copper silk, one of her mother's treasured pieces from the 1980s. Allison remembered admiring it as a child, the way it caught the light and seemed to glow from within. The gesture, so simple, so profound, brought fresh tears. Her mother hadn't just accepted her transformation. She had embraced it, anticipated desires Allison herself hadn't fully articulated. She carefully hung the dress where she would see it first thing in the morning, a bridge between her past and future, then slipped into bed. As sleep claimed her, Allison realized she had crossed a threshold. The journey wasn't over. Transitions never really ended, but for the first time, she wasn't just existing as Allison. She was living as her, fully present in the life she had once only imagined in secret moments. The military ceremony was smaller than the one a year earlier, but in many ways more significant. Allison stood at attention in her dress uniform, auburn hair neatly pinned back in regulation style, as Colonel Richards read the commendation. "For exemplary service and technical expertise during Operation Northern Shield, Staff Sergeant Allison Henderson is hereby awarded the Army Commendation Medal." The small assembly of officers and enlisted personnel applauded as the colonel pinned the medal to Allison's uniform. Her mother watched from the front row, pride evident in her expression, while Martinez, Peterson, and Dawson stood at parade rest nearby, all three recently promoted themselves following the successful operation. 2 years had passed since that fateful day in the barracks. In that time, Allison had not only completed her transition, but had risen through the ranks, her technical skills and leadership abilities recognized despite the challenges inherent in breaking new ground in the military hierarchy. The ceremony concluded with handshakes and photographs, the formal recognition of a job well done. As the attendees moved toward the reception area, Colonel Richards drew Allison aside.
"Henderson,"
he said, his normally stern expression softening slightly.
"There's something additional I wanted to discuss with you."
Allison straightened instinctively. "Sir?"
"The Pentagon is forming an advisory committee on gender inclusion in active service. Given your exemplary record and unique perspective, your name has been put forward as a potential member." He held up a hand to forestall her response. "It would mean temporary relocation to Washington, liaison work with several departments. Consider it carefully before you answer." The opportunity was unexpected, a chance to help shape policy that would affect others following her path. "I'm honored, sir. May I have until tomorrow to consider?" "Take the weekend,"
he replied.
"This isn't an order, Henderson. It's an opportunity. One I think you're uniquely qualified for, but it should be your choice."
As the colonel moved away to join the reception, Allison found herself momentarily alone, processing the implications of the offer. A position at the Pentagon would be a significant career advancement, a chance to make broader impact, and a separation from the support system that had carried her through the most challenging years of her life.
"They're headhunting you for something big, aren't they?"
Peterson's voice broke into her thoughts as he approached with 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to Allison.
"I recognize that expression. The holy shit they want me for something. Face."
Allison accepted the glass with a smile. "Pentagon Advisory Committee. Gender Inclusion Policy." Peterson whistled softly.
Wow. Congratulations,"
he offered, making it a question. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "It's an incredible opportunity, but
Washington isn't exactly next door," he finished for her. "You'd be starting over. New base, new colleagues."
The prospect, which should have been exciting, instead created a hollow feeling in her chest. These people, Peterson with his quiet steadiness, Martinez with his irrepressible humor, Dawson with his unexpected emotional intelligence, even her commanding officers who had supported her transition. They had become more than colleagues. They were the family she had built during the most vulnerable transformation of her life. "I don't know if I can do it again," she said quietly. "Be the first or the only. Be a symbol instead of just a soldier." Peterson considered this, his expression thoughtful.
"When we walked in on you that day, did you think you'd be where you are now? Medal on your chest, hair down to your shoulders?"
He gestured to her auburn waves, now pinned up for the ceremony but normally falling well past her shoulders. "Living openly as yourself?" "Not in my wildest dreams," she admitted. "You did that, not alone, sure. Nobody does anything truly significant alone, but you had the courage to keep going when it would have been easier to retreat." He clinked his glass against hers.
"Whatever you decide, you won't be starting from scratch this time. You've got a blueprint now, and we're only a phone call away."
From across the room, Martinez caught their eye and pointed dramatically at his watch, mouthing "Party time." Beside him, Dawson rolled his eyes, but nodded agreement.
"Speaking of which," Peterson continued, "we've got reservations at Emilio's to celebrate your medal properly. Your mom's already in the car with Martinez's girlfriend. You coming?"
Allison smiled, tucking the Pentagon offer away for later consideration. Today was for celebration, for acknowledging how far she had come from that terrified soldier in a red dress and blonde wig, certain that discovery meant the end of everything. "Wouldn't miss it," she replied, linking her arm through Peterson's as they headed toward their waiting friends, the medal on her chest catching the afternoon light, tangible proof that being truly herself hadn't ended her story, but rather had finally allowed it to properly begin. As they left the building, Martinez launched into an elaborate retelling of their last mission, complete with sound effects and exaggerated gestures that had Dawson constantly correcting details and Allison's mother laughing in delight. Watching them, Allison felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would always be new challenges ahead, whether in Washington or here. But she had discovered something precious in the process. The courage to be vulnerable, to be seen, and the joy of finding acceptance not despite her truth, but because of her willingness to live it. The auburn-haired woman who walked confidently among her friends bore little external resemblance to the soldier who had once hidden a trunk beneath his bunk. But inside, where it mattered most, there was a continuity of spirit, of determination, of the fundamental character that had always defined her, even before she had found the name or form that matched her soul. Allison Henderson, soldier, daughter, friend, woman, stepped into the warm afternoon sun, surrounded by the family she had found and the life she had built, one brave choice at a time.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!